So from also you may remember those 4 sub-questions I had. So one of them was really how is the PDC model applied in the project, and looking more at that. And so that was really the first, almost a research project in its own already. It was looking at this, and there were huge differences in the projects from how it was set out in proposals and reports to actually the understanding. That's where the attitudes and behaviors of World Vision stuff come in, from actually how project managers understood the written word and transferred it into the praxis, into practical terms, and how the community took it up. So there were complete a range of different levels. The literacy project, which I mentioned already before, had the highest level of PDC if you compare it with that model that I used, the from Bissett. Just the fact that it was actually the second time around and that there was a demand in the community to do it, that really helped and contributed to the easy facilitation of participatory structures. And yes, we had those 10 interrelated factors, which you just saw in the green bubbles, around 3 themes. And especially 3 of the factors seem to hinder seem to be of a restriction on implementing an ideal participatory development communication approach. Having said that, an ideal probably doesn't exist anywhere. So those 3 were the organization and culture, which in that particular context, the fact that I didn't know about 1 or 2 weeks before I flew to Papua New Guinea if I'm actually really going there was due to a lot of staff changes and internal changes. So there was a bit instability of also cultural values in the organization, and there was a lot of change. So, but the organization and culture present at the time when I was there, which was about to change and develop, just didn't seem to be the right environment to see the idea of having participatory development communication approaches and thinking. And the communication context between the organization and beneficiaries was also not quite made. The channels were not quite there to really enable the stakeholders to really engage as it would be in an ideal PDC approach. And the most crucial factor was actually more the project design as in its own, because most of the projects were, well, not most, all of them were donor-driven. World Vision is just putting some of the money in, but other money is coming from places like NZ8, what it was called at that time, or other government or non-governmental sponsors. And so to fulfill sponsorship requirements from those other external partners, a lot of the proposals are written in an office without consultation of the project community, and once the funding is actually guaranteed, that's when they approach the project community to go into details. So the quintessential idea is not participatory in the sense of it didn't start and was not initiated within the community, because the idea was developed from somewhere external. And most of it's also due to the funding scheme, most of the projects run just for 3 or 4 years, because that's what the funding is given. But a true PDC approach normally needs so much longer. It's more of a longer term involvement, not just a short time frame of 3 or 4 years, which just makes it difficult. Hence also the literacy project, which was already the 2nd time, so it was already about the 6th year of this project when I was there, so that made it so much more participatory. So, so from my own interpretation and conclusion, that I was really happy to have had an ethnographic study. Just gave me those insights and meaningful observations, and also, it was not really a work experience as such, but it really gave me a bit more of a background of actually having experienced something. And the 5 weeks, instead of, I was walking around with my notebook the whole time taking observation, but I was also doing a little bit of voluntary work and gave a few presentations on research methods and those kind of things, because it seemed to be quite appropriate being the researcher there. So it was a very good way of being immersed and finding out things that I probably wouldn't have been able with a more distanced quantitative approach. So that's the end of my presentation. Happy to take any questions. I hope you're still not asleep. Yes, please.
I'm just finding it a little bit hard to understand how you could have taken on 4 projects which seem like separate research entities in themselves and crammed them all into one thesis.
Yes, it was indeed a challenge. And I had looked actually at, I think, 6 projects. So, but that was one of the things during the analysis and looking at the data where I thought I had to disregard some of them. I just have to focus on the most important one. It was more a matter of when I was there, what was available and where I could go and see because the World Vision workers normally don't visit the project communities so often. They normally go there every 2 or 3 weeks. Depends on the project. Some are more often. So in this short time frame of 5 weeks in Papua New Guinea, I couldn't. If I had just focused on 1 or 2 projects, it would have been really difficult to get a lot of information on one particular project. So that's why I got.
That's what ethnography was that you were meant to.
Yeah. I mean, I was looking at how can I say, at the World Vision approach in Papua New Guinea, and then with the examples of those 4 projects. Because some of the interviews I did with senior level staff, since they're overlooking and overseeing the entire project, not only particular projects, I mean, they were giving their point of view anyway on higher level, which was overarching and not only looking at one particular project. But it was comparing, case studies is the wrong word, but it was comparing the 4 not meanings, but the structures and in the factors in the implementation of those 4 projects. It was also a matter of comparing those 4 to have a bit of a better understanding if it's a pattern or if it's just something particular to this one project. I know what you mean. It is, but it is still a small area anyway, because it was really just the World Vision approach in Papua New Guinea and those 4 projects. So it was not comparing all the Pacific projects or on that level.
You said that some of your participants were illiterate and
Yes.
stuff. So how did you make sure that the results from your studies got back to them in a way that they could understand?
That was the thing where I, unfortunately, just due to the geographical distance, that by the time I actually had research results, I was back in New Zealand. So the only channel was really to give it through to send it to the project managers and ask them to forward it. So those ones I was unfortunately not able to report back directly, but was just hoping for the assistance and the collaboration with the World Vision staff. But that's definitely a fair point, because it's in the ideal world I would have gone back and kind of shook everyone's hand to say thank you for your participation and one of the limitations.
When you developed your research design, were you already totally aware that you would do some observation followed by some kind of interviews and documents, or did you like the idea that you would do some in-depth interviews and some kind of focus group that you developed during the project?
It was it was definitely a hands-in-hands approach. I think it was for me quite clear, relatively quite early in the development of the research purpose and research question stage, that it will be a qualitative research, just from reading reading other research examples, how they did it, and just from the background information and the arguments for qualitative. But I mean, by the time the research question was formalized, I knew also what type of research I want to do. But yeah, it was really the research question I found the most difficult part of everything. I started I think one of my first assignments during the master's studies was already, I didn't know at that time what I will be doing later for the research of the master thesis, but one of my first assignments was already something that I could later on use for the literature review. And so there were in quite a few of my coursework assignments during the year or 1.5 years prior, were already bit by bit getting me there. And so there was a lot so even that I thought I have already basically a literature review written, I found it really difficult to come up with a specific research question and something that I'm interested in that hasn't been looked at before and makes sense and is possible in this scope of a master thesis and not a life project.
It depends on.
I was just going to say, did your topic come out of like a personal like passion for anything in particular, or like how did you?
Definitely, I had a passion for just development assistance and development work at home, and was very interested to work in this area, and hence also my part-time job with World Vision here in Auckland. And then, yeah, I think it was just through some of the other papers that I got also more passionate about the participatory idea and doing really the grassroots level approach. So yeah, and I think it's very, very important to have this passion, because that's really what brings you through those long nights when you're working on the final parts of your research. Should still have the motivation, interest to do this. I think once you decide for something, it's good to just go with it and make the most out of it. For me personally, also, I like to travel and go to other places. And myself, I'm from Germany and came here, so even just doing the actual masters in a different country was very interesting for me. Having had, obviously, added another layer of challenges to it, just not being a native speaker myself, but it's just made it more interesting. And then, in addition, doing my master project overseas and having a bit of a break from the routine, ordinary study life that you have here, I think it helped me personally on an emotional level as well to just to go through it faster, and it didn't seem such a long project later on because it had clear phases. I had quite I think everyone has a plan in the beginning, and then you reassess and reevaluate your plans hundreds of times, and your timeline is kind of suddenly dragging out and getting longer. But having had this flight ticket booked, it was clear that's what I have to do by then. So, of course, my literature review was not written by then, but it was something was there. So something good enough to have a start, and yeah, and then also. Made promises to World Vision, and I will give them a presentation on my results and those milestones. It was quite helpful having those personal milestones that I wanted to achieve.
Yeah, thank you very much for this. Did you say that you wanted to do 20 minutes presentation, by the way? 20 minutes was maximum. I think that perhaps you got the impression from Birgit's presentation that she had an immense amount of data. Because this type of research generates so much data that it can be mind-boggling. And as Birgit said, she had to code and recode and decide that some of this data is not going to be used in this life, or perhaps in the next. But it is the nature of this type of research that you accumulate so much data that some of it is not going to be used in the end. But you don't know from the beginning what you're going to do with it. So you keep collecting data. And this type of research also is very good at providing recommendations for further research, because it identifies whole new areas that need to be looked at. The good thing with Birgit, for instance, you will see here is that although she had a theoretical model to start with, she generated her own models in the end. And that is the value of qualitative research. You generate theory out of a practical observation. Well, with quantitative research, you have that model and you apply your findings in that model. Well, Birgit demonstrated very clearly she used the data to generate new models. And that was a very good example. So you need to